Greetings to you on the Fear Files channel. Today we're diving into one of the most mysterious and controversial crimes in American history. The murder of 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey. This is a case that has haunted investigators, journalists, and millions of people around the world for almost 3 decades. On December 26, 1996, the day after Christmas, in an elite neighborhood of Boulder, Colorado, something happened that would forever change America's perception of home safety. But the strangest thing about this case is not the crime itself, but how the investigation was conducted, what mistakes were made, and what is possibly being deliberately hidden from the public. The morning of December 26, 1996. Around 6 in the morning, Patsy Ramsey, JonBenét's mother, descended the spiral staircase of her 3-story mansion. On the steps, she discovered 3 pages of a handwritten ransom note. In the note, an unknown person demanded $118,000, a strangely precise sum that almost matched her husband John Ramsey's Christmas bonus. Patsy immediately called the police at 5:52 a.m. She was hysterical, screaming that her daughter had been kidnapped. The first officers arrived within 6 minutes. And here begins the first series of critical errors that effectively destroyed this investigation in its infancy. Critical errors of the first hours. Officer Rick French was one of the first to arrive at the scene. According to kidnapping protocol, he should have immediately isolated the crime scene and begun its methodical processing. But this didn't happen. Instead, the Ramsey house turned into something resembling an open area. The parents called friends and a priest. Over the next several hours, about 20 people passed through the house. Family, friends, lawyers, church representatives. They walked through the rooms, touched things, comforted the parents. Critically important evidence was irretrievably lost or contaminated. But most striking, Officer French conducted only a superficial inspection of the house. He looked into the basement, where the girl's body would later be found, but didn't conduct a thorough search. Why? This was a house in an elite neighborhood. The family seemed respectable, and the ransom note indicated a kidnapping. Everyone assumed the child was no longer in the house. The discovery that changed everything. Almost 8 hours passed. The kidnappers didn't call, although the notes said they would contact the family. Detective Linda Arndt, who was coordinating the operation on site, asked John Ramsey and his friend Fleet White to search the house once more. Perhaps they'd find something that was missed. At 1:05 p.m., John Ramsey went down to the basement. There, in a small room the family called the wine cellar, he made a horrifying discovery. His daughter lay on the floor, covered with a white blanket. Around her neck was wrapped a nylon rope, tightened with a wooden stick. This was a garrote, a sophisticated instrument of strangulation. John Ramsey immediately tore the duct tape from his daughter's mouth, untied her hands, and carried the body upstairs. From a forensic standpoint, this was a catastrophe. He contaminated the crime scene, destroyed potential evidence, changed the position of the body. But can you blame a father who just discovered his dead daughter? What the autopsy showed. The autopsy, conducted by medical examiner John Meyer, revealed shocking details. JonBenét died from asphyxiation combined with traumatic brain injury. On her head was discovered an 8.5-inch skull fracture, a mark from a blow by a blunt object with tremendous force. But the sequence of events proved controversial. What happened first? The blow to the head or the strangulation? Experts disagreed. Some believed the blow was delivered first and could have caused loss of consciousness, while the garrote was applied later, possibly to stage a more complex crime. Others claimed the opposite. Signs were also discovered that some experts interpreted as evidence of sexual assault, although this remained a subject of heated debate among specialists. No sperm or other biological traces of an attacker were found on the girl's body, which made identifying the perpetrator even more difficult. DNA samples were found under JonBenét's fingernails that didn't belong to any family members. This discovery would become a key element in subsequent debates about the Ramseys' guilt or innocence. The ransom note, the strangest evidence. Let's return to the ransom note, a document that from the very beginning raised more questions than it gave answers. This was a 3-page handwritten note, one of the longest ransom notes in forensic history. Usually kidnappers write briefly and to the point, but this note was verbose, almost theatrical. It stated, "Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country it serves." The author demanded $118,000 and threatened to behead the girl if the conditions weren't met. Handwriting analysis couldn't exclude Patsy Ramsey as the author of the note, although it didn't definitively confirm she wrote it. Moreover, the note was written on a notepad found in the Ramsey house, with a marker that also belonged to the family. Several draft versions of the note were discovered in the notepad. Someone had practiced writing it right in the house. Think about this. A kidnapper broke into the house, kidnapped a child, then sat down and calmly wrote a 3-page note, making several drafts, used materials from the house. This doesn't resemble the behavior of a nervous criminal who just committed a kidnapping. The theory of family involvement. From the very beginning, Boulder police focused on the Ramsey family, and there were grounds for this that we cannot ignore. First, statistics. In the overwhelming majority of cases of child murders, the perpetrator is someone from the close circle, most often a family member. Second, there are no signs of forced entry. All windows and doors were locked from the inside. How did the kidnapper enter and exit the house without leaving traces? Third, the parents' behavior seemed strange to some investigators. Literally days after the murder, they hired lawyers and refused to give separate statements to police. They gave interviews to the media before agreeing to full interrogations. A theory emerged that someone from the family, possibly JonBenét's brother, 9-year-old Burke, or one of the parents, accidentally or as a result of an argument struck the girl. Then, in panic, an attempt was made to stage a kidnapping to divert suspicion from the family. This theory explained many oddities. The ransom note written with materials from the house, the absence of signs of forced entry, knowledge of the house layout, the specific ransom amount connected to John's bonus, unknown assailant or someone from the house. But the theory of family involvement faced serious problems. The main one, DNA under the fingernails and on JonBenét's underwear that didn't match anyone in the family. In 2008, when more advanced DNA analysis methods appeared, District Attorney Mary Lacey officially apologized to the Ramsey family and stated that the DNA data effectively cleared them of suspicion. Supporters of the theory about an outside assailant pointed to several important moments. A window was discovered in the basement that possibly could have served as an entry point. Although there were no obvious signs of forced entry on the window, some experts believe an experienced criminal could have entered through it without leaving obvious evidence. Also found was a boot print in the basement that didn't belong to anyone in the family. Fibers discovered on the girl's body didn't match any clothing of family members. There is also a darker version, that the kidnapper had watched the family in advance, possibly even been in the house during the Christmas party the Ramseys hosted on December 23rd. About 20 people attended this party. Someone could have remained in the house unnoticed or obtained access to a key. Conflict between investigators. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that deep conflict existed between various law enforcement agencies. Boulder police were convinced of the family's guilt. The district attorney's office was more cautious and pointed to the lack of direct evidence. This conflict paralyzed the investigation. Police accused the prosecutor's office of being insufficiently aggressive. The prosecutor's office accused police of tunnel vision, fixation on one theory while ignoring other possibilities. In 1999, a grand jury, a group of jurors examining evidence, secretly voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey. But District Attorney Alex Hunter refused to sign the indictment, stating that the evidence was insufficient for successful prosecution. This decision became the subject of fierce debate. Critics accused Hunter of yielding to pressure from the Ramseys' lawyers and allowing a wealthy family to escape justice. Defenders of his decision argued that he acted ethically by refusing to prosecute people without sufficient evidence. Media circus and destruction of reputations. The media turned the Ramsey case into a national sensation. Photos of JonBenét from children's beauty pageants, in makeup with styled hair in bright costumes, were broadcast across the country. Many people felt discomfort seeing a 6-year-old girl dressed and made up like an adult woman. Questions arose about whether the parents raised their daughter correctly, whether they subjected her to too much early attention and sexualization through these pageants. The Ramsey family was subjected to brutal condemnation in the press. They were accused, tried, and found guilty in the court of public opinion long before all facts were gathered. Patsy Ramsey especially suffered from this attention. She died of ovarian cancer in 2006, never knowing who killed her daughter and unable to fully clear her name in the public eye. Before her death, she insisted on her innocence and pleaded for the perpetrator to be found. John Ramsey is still alive. He's now in his 80s and continues to demand a review of the case using modern DNA analysis methods. His older son, Burke, who was 9 at the time of the murder, also became an object of suspicion and speculation, which traumatized him for life. Alternative suspects. Over the years of investigation, several alternative theories and suspects emerged. One of them was Bill McReynolds, a man who played Santa Claus at the Ramseys' Christmas party several days before the murder. He had access to the house, spent time with JonBenét, and some details of his personal history raised investigators' suspicions. However, thorough investigation revealed no direct evidence of his involvement. His wife was with him the night of the murder, which gave him an alibi, though not an ironclad one. Another suspect was John Mark Carr, a teacher who confessed to JonBenét's murder in Thailand in 2006. His confession caused an international sensation, and he was extradited to the U.S. But it very quickly became clear that his confession was false. His DNA didn't match samples from the crime scene, and he wasn't even in Colorado at the time. There were other persons of interest, family acquaintances, reporters, even neighbors. But sufficient evidence for arrest wasn't gathered on any of them. Modern technologies and hope for solution. Today, almost 3 decades after the murder, new hope has emerged. DNA analysis technologies have advanced far beyond what was available in 1996. Genetic genealogy, a method that uses public genealogical databases to identify criminals through their distant relatives, has helped solve several high-profile cold cases, including the case of the Golden State Killer. who evaded capture for decades. John Ramsey actively lobbies for the transfer of evidence to independent laboratories for reanalysis using modern methods. He claims Boulder police resist this because they fear new data will show the scale of their errors in the original investigation. In 2021, Boulder police stated they continue working on the case and regularly review evidence using new technologies. They've analyzed more than 1,500 pieces of evidence, taken DNA samples from more than 200 people, and worked through 21,000 tips. But there's no concrete progress. JonBenét Ramsey's killer has still not been found. What is police hiding? So we come to the main question of our investigation. What is police hiding? Why does this case remain unsolved after almost 30 years? There are several possible explanations. The first and simplest, police aren't hiding anything intentionally. They simply failed the investigation from the very beginning due to incompetence and lack of experience. Boulder Police Department hadn't dealt with child murders. This was a quiet university town. They weren't prepared for such a case. Critical errors of the first hours, contamination of the crime scene, improper handling of evidence, allowing many people to walk through the house, destroyed chances for successful investigation. Perhaps police simply don't want to admit the scale of their failures now. The second explanation is more sinister. Maybe police know or suspect who the killer is but don't have enough evidence for charges. Remember the 1999 grand jury that voted to indict the Ramseys? Details of this vote were kept secret for years. When they leaked to the press, it became clear jurors believed the parents were involved, but the prosecutor understood the case would fall apart in court. Perhaps police still believe the family was involved, but without a confession or new evidence, nothing can be done. And they prefer to keep this to themselves to avoid criticism for inability to bring the case to trial. The third theory suggests certain evidence or information was lost or destroyed, accidentally or intentionally. There were reports that some physical evidence wasn't properly documented or was stored improperly. If this is true, admitting such errors could lead to lawsuits and professional liability. The fourth explanation relates to DNA. As we already mentioned, DNA from an unknown person was found under JonBenét's fingernails and on her underwear. But some experts expressed doubts about the significance of these samples. They pointed out the DNA could have gotten there accidentally, through cross-contamination at the factory where the underwear was manufactured, or through any other innocent contacts. If police believe the DNA is a red herring, a false trail, but cannot publicly state this, because in 2008 the prosecutor already officially apologized to the Ramseys based on this DNA, this creates a stalemate. They can't move forward, can't publicly return to the theory about the family, but also can't find a DNA match with an outside perpetrator. Public pressure and politics. The political aspect cannot be ignored either. The Ramsey family was wealthy and influential. John Ramsey was a successful businessman. They immediately hired a team of expensive lawyers and PR specialists. Some critics claim this legal machine helped protect the family from more aggressive investigation. On the other hand, media and public pressure on police and prosecutors was enormous. Their every move was analyzed, criticized, discussed in national news. This pressure could lead to both excessive caution and hasty decisions. There's also a theory that various law enforcement agencies were protecting their turf. The FBI was brought into the case, but Boulder police limited their role. Was this a matter of pride, unwillingness to admit help was needed, or fear that the feds would discover local failures? Lessons of the Ramsey case. Regardless of who killed JonBenét Ramsey, This case taught law enforcement agencies across the country many painful lessons. First, the critical importance of immediate crime scene isolation. Every person who entered the Ramsey house that morning potentially destroyed evidence that could have solved the case. Second, the danger of fixating on one theory too early. If investigators convinced themselves the family was guilty, they could have missed other possibilities and leads. Third, the importance of coordination between different agencies and overcoming territorial disputes for the good of the investigation. Fourth, the necessity of protecting evidence integrity, especially biological samples that can be analyzed using future technologies. These lessons were applied in subsequent investigations across the country, possibly helping solve other cases and prevent repetition of JonBenét's tragedy. Family in the shadow of tragedy. How does the Ramsey family live now? Almost 30 years later, Patsy died, taking with her her version of events that night. John remarried several times, tried to rebuild a normal life. But the ghost of this case haunts him. Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's older brother, grew up under the shadow of suspicion. Some theories accused him, a 9-year-old boy at the time of his sister's death, of involvement in the murder. These accusations were groundless and cruel, but they pursued him. In 2016, he gave a rare interview, trying to tell his version and defend the family name. Many close friends of the family turned away from them under pressure of public opinion. Others remained loyal, insisting on the Ramseys' innocence. The family was split not by the crime, but by the suspicions and accusations that followed it. Conspiracy theories and internet detectives. With the growth of the internet, the Ramsey case attracted an army of amateur detectives. Forums dedicated to this case analyze every detail, every photo, every word from police reports. Some of these internet investigators have done impressive work, discovering details that professionals missed. But there's also a dark side. People with no connection to the case were publicly accused on forums and social media. Their lives were destroyed by unfounded accusations. This became a warning about the dangers of mob justice in the digital age. Outright fantastical conspiracy theories also emerged, from involvement of pedophile networks to celebrity participation. These theories distracted attention from the real investigation and turned tragedy into entertainment. Why this case matters? One might ask, why do we still talk about this case? Why JonBenét Ramsey and not thousands of other children who die every year? Partly it's connected to circumstances. A beautiful girl from a wealthy family, strange case details, photos from beauty pageants. This was the perfect story for media. But this case is important for other reasons too. It demonstrates how easily an investigation can be destroyed due to errors in the first hours. It shows the danger of bias and tunnel vision in investigative work. It illustrates the destructive power of the court of public opinion. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that justice doesn't always prevail. Sometimes criminals aren't punished. Sometimes families don't get answers. This is an uncomfortable truth that's difficult to accept. Current state of the case. Where are we now in 2025? The Ramsey case remains officially open. Boulder police claim they continue working on it, but don't reveal specific details. In recent years, several documentaries and TV shows have again drawn attention to the case. Some of them presented new interviews, new analysis of evidence. But no breakthrough occurred. John Ramsey continues to publicly call for the use of genetic genealogy, a method that has revolutionized solving cold cases. He claims that if police would send DNA samples to specialized laboratories and compare them with genealogical databases, the killer could be identified through relatives. Police don't publicly explain why this isn't being done. They refer to ongoing investigation and the need to maintain confidentiality of methods. But many critics believe the real reason is unwillingness to admit the case was botched and fear that new technologies might expose it. Possible scenarios. Let's examine different scenarios of what could have happened that night, based on available evidence. Scenario 1. Tragic accident in the family with subsequent staging. In this version, someone from the family, possibly the brother during an argument or one of the parents in a moment of losing control, struck JonBenét on the head. The blow was strong, possibly fatal, but not instantaneous. In panic, realizing tragedy had occurred, a decision was made to stage a kidnapping. A ransom note was written, a garrote applied to create the impression of an experienced criminal's work. The family hoped this would divert suspicion. This scenario explains the note written with materials from the house, absence of signs of forced entry, the strange ransom amount. But it poorly aligns with DNA of unknown origin and requires the entire family to participate in covering up the crime. Scenario 2. Outside pedophile assailant. An experienced criminal, possibly watching the family, broke into the house during or after the Christmas party. He could have hidden in the basement, waiting for everyone to go to sleep. At night, he entered JonBenét's room, possibly intending to kidnap her, but something went wrong. The girl woke up, screamed, or resisted. In panic, he struck her on the head, then strangled her. The ransom note was written in advance or after to create a false trail. This scenario explains the unknown DNA, but requires explanation of how the perpetrator knew the house layout and where to find the notepad and marker. Scenario 3. Someone from the family's close circle. Perhaps a person who attended the Christmas party or had access to the house. A family friend, hired worker, distant relative. This person knew the house layout, knew about John Ramsey's bonus, could enter and exit unnoticed. They might have had keys or knowledge of unlocked entrances. After the crime, they dissolved among the many people who came to the house the next morning, possibly even helping to console the family. This scenario explains many oddities, but requires identification of a specific suspect who still doesn't exist. Scenario 4. Random criminal with unique motive. Some researchers suggested the crime could have had a personal, almost ritualistic character. A garrote is an unusual weapon for a spontaneous murder. It requires certain knowledge or planning. Perhaps the perpetrator had a personal connection with the family, real or imagined, that motivated them to this crime. Maybe it was someone John Ramsey fired, or someone obsessed with Patsy or JonBenét herself after seeing her at beauty pageants. This scenario explains the strange nature of the crime, but is very difficult to prove without direct evidence. Psychological profile of the killer. FBI profilers who worked on the case tried to create a psychological portrait of the killer based on crime details. Their conclusions were contradictory because different details pointed to different types of criminals. On one hand, use of a garrote and certain sophistication in staging suggested an organized, possibly experienced criminal with certain knowledge. On the other hand, leaving the body in the house, the long and strange ransom note, use of materials from the house, all this indicated a disorganized, possibly impulsive crime. Some profilers believed the perpetrator knew the family and felt some emotional connection with them, which would explain covering the body with a blanket, a gesture suggesting care or regret. Others saw this simply as an attempt to hide the body from immediate discovery. The sexual motive of the crime was also subject to debate. Were there signs of sexual assault or not? Experts disagreed. If this was a sexual crime, it's strange that no biological traces of the attacker were found. If this wasn't a sexual crime, then what was the motive? The media's role in shaping the narrative. One cannot discuss the Ramsey case without touching on the role of mass media. From the very beginning, media created a certain narrative that deeply influenced public perception of the case. Television channels endlessly played footage of JonBenét from beauty pageants. These images, a little girl in makeup with false teeth in glittering costumes, singing and dancing on stage, shocked many Americans. Questions arose. Wasn't this a form of child exploitation? Didn't this attract predators' attention? Parents were shown as wealthy, cold, more concerned with lawyers than finding their daughter's killer. Their house in Boulder was a huge mansion, a symbol of privilege and wealth. This created a narrative about rich people who think they're above the law. Were these depictions fair? Largely no. Participation in children's beauty pageants, though controversial, is not a crime. Hiring lawyers is a reasonable decision for anyone who became an object of suspicion in a murder. But media weren't interested in nuances. They wanted drama, conflict, villains. Over the years, the tone of coverage changed. As new documentaries and investigations appeared, some media began to look more critically at police work and acknowledge that the Ramsey family may have been unfairly demonized. But damage to their reputation had already been done and proved practically irreversible. Comparison with other unsolved cases. The Ramsey case is not the only high-profile unsolved child murder in American history, but it's certainly one of the most famous. What distinguishes it from others? Take, for example, the Madeleine McCann case, a British girl who disappeared in Portugal in 2007. As with JonBenét, the parents became objects of suspicion. As with the Ramseys, media created a circus around the case. But there's a key difference. In the McCann case, the body was never found, making establishing what happened even more complex. Or the Casey Anthony case, a mother accused of murdering her little daughter Kaylee in 2008. Unlike the Ramsey case, Casey Anthony was arrested and stood trial. But, to many shock, she was acquitted because prosecutors couldn't prove how exactly the girl died and who was responsible. These cases show a common problem. Child murders evoke a special emotional reaction. The public demands answers, demands justice immediately. This pressure can both help investigation by attracting resources and attention, and harm it by creating haste and bias. Technical details that complicate everything. Let's return to some technical details that make this case so complex. Time of death. The medical examiner determined JonBenét died approximately between 10 p.m. on December 25th and 2 a.m. on December 26th. But this estimate was approximate. Patsy stated she put her daughter to bed around 10 p.m. If the murder occurred soon after, this narrows the time window and list of possible suspects. If it occurred closer to morning, the window expands. Sequence of injuries. What happened first? The blow to the head or strangulation? This is a critical question. If the blow was first and caused loss of consciousness, then strangulation could have been an attempt at staging or a merciful act to end suffering. If strangulation was first, then the blow to the head could have been the final act of violence. Experts still haven't reached consensus. Stomach contents. The autopsy showed JonBenét's stomach contained pineapple fragments. A bowl with pineapple was found in the Ramseys' kitchen. Patsy claimed she didn't give her daughter pineapple. John also denied it. Burke initially denied it, but later admitted he possibly ate pineapple that night. This suggests JonBenét woke up after being put to bed and went downstairs to the kitchen. But why? And who was with her? Fibers and DNA. Fibers were found on JonBenét's body that matched clothing Patsy wore that night. The defense explained this as innocent contact when a mother put her daughter to bed. Fibers were also found on the duct tape that was on the girl's mouth. Critics pointed out Patsy could have touched the tape when hugging the body after its discovery. But investigators considered these fibers suspicious. The grand jury and its secrets. Returning to the 1999 grand jury. This is one of the most controversial aspects of the case. A grand jury is a group of citizens who hear evidence and decide whether it's sufficient for indictment. Unlike trial proceedings, the grand jury process is secret. In the Ramsey case, the grand jury heard evidence for 13 months. Eventually, they voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey, but not for murder. The charge was child abuse resulting in death and accessory to a crime. This is strange wording. It suggests jurors didn't believe the parents themselves killed JonBenét, but believed they knew who did and helped cover up the crime. Maybe they were protecting Burke or someone else from a close circle. District Attorney Alex Hunter refused to sign the indictment. He held a press conference stating evidence was insufficient for successful prosecution. This fact was kept secret until 2013, when reporters gained access to documents through court. Why did Hunter make this decision? He claimed he acted ethically, refusing to prosecute people without solid evidence. Critics believed he was afraid of confronting the Ramseys' expensive lawyers and didn't want to risk his career on a case he could lose. This decision had enormous consequences. If the case had gone to trial, many details now hidden would have become public. The Ramseys' lawyers would have had to reveal their version of events under oath. Perhaps one of the witnesses would have said something new under pressure of cross-examination. But this didn't happen. The theory about protecting the brother. One of the most controversial theories suggests 9-year-old Burke Ramsey was involved in his sister's death, and the parents staged the crime scene to protect him. Supporters of this theory point to several moments. Burke admitted he wasn't asleep when parents thought he was. He admitted he possibly ate pineapple in the kitchen, that same pineapple found in JonBenét's stomach. This suggests the children were together in the kitchen after parents thought they were in bed. It's presumed an argument could have occurred between the children. Burke struck JonBenét with something heavy, maybe a flashlight found in the kitchen. The blow was stronger than he intended. The girl lost consciousness. In panic, parents discovered her and realized the injury was fatal. Since Burke was a minor, he couldn't be held criminally responsible for murder in Colorado. But the scandal would have destroyed the family. Therefore, according to the theory, parents made a desperate decision to stage a kidnapping and murder by an outside perpetrator to protect their son. This theory explains many oddities of the case. The ransom note written with materials from the house, absence of signs of forced entry, parents' strange behavior, the grand jury indictment wording about accessory to a crime. However, this theory has serious problems. First, it requires parents in a state of shock and grief to create a complex staging in several hours, including fabricating a garrote and writing a long ransom note. Second, it doesn't explain unknown DNA found on the girl's body. Third, it requires both parents, both Patsy, who is a devout Christian, and John, a respected businessman, to agree to such horrifying cover-up of a crime. Burke Ramsey categorically denies any involvement. In 2016, he sued creators of a television program that promoted this theory and won a large settlement. He gave a rare interview to Dr. Phil in which he appeared strange, smiled at inappropriate moments, seemed socially awkward. Some interpreted this as a sign of guilt, others as a natural reaction of a person with social anxiety traumatized by years of unfounded accusations. The role of lawyers and PR machine. From the very beginning, the Ramsey family assembled an impressive team of lawyers and PR specialists. Some saw this as a sign of guilt. Why need lawyers if you're innocent and want to help the investigation? Others saw this as reasonable precaution in a situation where police clearly focused on the family as suspects. The Ramseys' lawyers skillfully managed information flow. They gave interviews to selected journalists, controlled when and how the family interacted with police, challenged information leaks that could be harmful to their clients. This created a strange situation where instead of direct investigation with family participation, the process turned into a legal chess game. Police wanted separate interrogations of parents. Lawyers insisted on joint interviews with pre-agreed questions. Police wanted to obtain family medical records. Lawyers fought against this in court. On one hand, it's every American's right to have legal representation. On the other hand, this significantly complicated the investigation. A question arose. If parents are truly innocent and want to find their daughter's killer, why aren't they cooperating fully with police? Ramsey defenders argue they had every reason not to trust Boulder police. Almost from day one, police leaked information to the press, painting the family in negative light. Investigators publicly called parents the only suspects. In such circumstances, lawyers argue, cooperation would have been naive and dangerous. The financial side of tragedy. The financial side of this case is rarely discussed, but it's significant. The Ramsey family spent millions of dollars on lawyers, private detectives, experts, and PR campaigns. This money could have ruined most families, but the Ramseys were wealthy enough to afford it. This raises an uncomfortable question about fairness in the justice system. If JonBenét had been from a poor family, would her case have received the same attention? Could her parents have defended themselves as effectively if they couldn't afford a team of expensive lawyers? On the other hand, police and prosecutors had practically unlimited state resources. They could hire experts, conduct tests, work on the case for years. In some sense, this was a battle between private wealth and state power. The family also received some financial compensation from media. They won several libel lawsuits against newspapers and television programs that published false or misleading information. These wins amounted to millions of dollars, though probably didn't cover their full legal expenses. Psychological impact on the community. JonBenét's murder deeply affected Boulder, Colorado. This was a city that prided itself on its safety, its progressive character, its quality of life. Suddenly, it became known as the location of one of the most infamous unsolved murders in the country. Residents were divided. Some believed in the Ramseys' guilt, others defended them. Neighbors stopped talking to each other. Children couldn't play on the street without anxious parental supervision. The atmosphere of trust and safety was destroyed. Boulder police also suffered. Criticism of their handling of the case was merciless. Several key investigators resigned or were transferred. The department's reputation was seriously undermined. But there were also positive changes. The Ramsey case led to significant improvements in how police handle crime scenes, especially in child abduction cases. Protocols were revised, training improved. In some sense, JonBenét's tragedy helped protect other children in the future. Comparison with modern technologies. If JonBenét's murder had occurred today, the investigation would be completely different. Technologies available in 1996 are primitive compared to what we have now. Genetic genealogy. This technology uses public genealogical databases to identify criminals through their distant relatives. It has solved dozens of cold cases in recent years, including the Golden State Killer case, who evaded capture for decades. DNA from the Ramsey crime scene could be uploaded to these databases, and if the killer has relatives who underwent genetic testing, he could be identified. Surveillance cameras. In 1996, home security cameras were rare. Today, they're everywhere, on doorbells, in neighbor surveillance cameras, on streetlights. If someone had approached the Ramsey house that night, there likely would have been video recording. Digital footprints. Today, almost every action leaves a digital trail. Internet searches, mobile location data, credit card purchases, social media posts. If the killer had researched methods, purchased materials, or even just moved around the city, there would be records. Advanced evidence analysis. Modern technologies can extract and analyze microscopic amounts of DNA, fingerprints, fibers. They can date samples, determine source of materials, create detailed 3D models of crime scenes. John Ramsey claims Boulder police resist applying these new technologies to his daughter's case. Why? Perhaps because they fear what might be discovered. Not necessarily the killer's identity, but the scale of their own errors in the original investigation. Ethical dilemmas of investigation. The Ramsey case raises many ethical questions beyond simple "who did it?" When does suspicion become persecution? Police have the right and duty to investigate suspects. But when does this investigation cross the line into persecution? The Ramsey family claims police were so convinced of their guilt they refused to consider other possibilities, effectively sabotaging their own investigation. Balance between press freedom and right to fair trial. Media have a constitutional right to cover news, but their coverage of the Ramsey case created an atmosphere where fair trial would be almost impossible. How to find impartial jurors when everyone in the country has seen JonBenét's photos and has an opinion about her parents' guilt. Children's rights in investigations. Burke Ramsey was only 9 when his sister was murdered. He was interrogated, analyzed, discussed in national media. Were his rights protected? Should children be protected from such attention, even if they potentially could be witnesses to a crime? Use of unsolved cases as entertainment. Dozens of documentaries, books, TV shows were created about the Ramsey case. Some are made with good intentions, trying to shed light on the case. Others are openly exploitative, using a girl's tragedy for profit. Where's the line? Do we have the right to turn real tragedies into entertainment? Latest developments and new hope. In recent years, several events have occurred that instill some hope the case may finally be solved. In 2021, Boulder police stated they're working with private laboratories and genetic genealogy experts, although details of this cooperation weren't disclosed. This inspired hope that modern technologies will finally be applied to the case. In 2022 to 2023, several new documentaries have presented a fresh look at the case, including interviews with people who previously hadn't given public comments. Some of these films proposed new theories and pointed to potential suspects who weren't properly investigated in the original investigation. John Ramsey, now in his 80s, continues to actively demand justice for his daughter. He regularly gives interviews, participates in documentaries, lobbies for case review. His message is simple: use modern technologies, check DNA through genealogical databases, find the killer. There's growing pressure on Boulder police and Colorado authorities to transfer the case to an independent agency, or at least allow independent analysis of evidence. Petitions have been signed by thousands of people. Politicians are beginning to pay attention. But so far, there are no concrete results. The case remains open, but frozen. What is police really hiding? So we return to our main question. What is Boulder police really hiding? After almost 30 years of studying this case, analyzing thousands of pages of documents, interviews, and evidence, several most likely explanations can be identified. The first possibility: concealing incompetence. This is the simplest and perhaps most likely explanation. Boulder police catastrophically failed the investigation from the first hours. They didn't isolate the crime scene, allowed dozens of people to contaminate evidence, didn't conduct proper search of the house, lost critically important samples. Admitting the full scale of these errors would open the department to massive lawsuits, destroy careers, undermine public trust. It's easier to keep the case under active investigation and not reveal details. The second possibility: conflicting evidence. Perhaps police have evidence pointing in different directions. Some evidence suggests family involvement, other, an outside perpetrator. These contradictions make it impossible to build a convincing case in any direction. Public disclosure of these contradictions would only add confusion and give defense attorneys material to destroy any future prosecution. The third possibility: protecting informants or methods. In any major investigation, confidential informants and special investigative methods are used that cannot be publicly disclosed without damaging future operations. Perhaps some information in the Ramsey case was obtained this way, and its disclosure would reveal sources or methods police want to keep secret. The fourth possibility: political pressure. Boulder is a relatively small city with close ties among the elite. The Ramsey family was part of this elite. Perhaps there was political pressure, overt or hidden, not to pursue certain people too aggressively. Or conversely, pressure to pursue the family despite insufficient evidence due to public outrage. The fifth possibility: protecting the killer's identity. This is the darkest scenario. What if police know or strongly suspect who killed JonBenét, but cannot prove it? What if this person died, left the country, or is in such a position that prosecution is impossible? Revealing a suspect without ability to bring them to justice would only cause anger and frustration. Impact of the case on legislation and practice. One of the few positive consequences of JonBenét's tragedy was change in law enforcement practice across the country. After the Ramsey case, many police departments revised their protocols for responding to child abductions. It's now standard practice to immediately fully isolate a potential crime scene, even if it seems the child was kidnapped and taken away. Everyone who enters the scene must be registered, and their presence must be limited to absolutely necessary. There are also changes in how police interact with victims' families. The balance between sympathy and suspicion is now more carefully calibrated. Families receive more support, but are also subjected to more professional and systematic investigation. Investigator training was improved. More attention is now paid to preserving evidence, avoiding contamination, documenting every step of the process. The Ramsey case is used in police academies across the country as an example of how not to conduct an investigation. Legislation on sex offender registration was strengthened in several states, partly in response to this case. If the killer was a sexual predator, perhaps he could have been identified earlier if stricter tracking systems existed. Cultural legacy of the case. The JonBenét Ramsey case has become more than just an unsolved murder. It has become a cultural phenomenon, a symbol of multiple social issues. For some, it's a story about privilege and how wealth can protect from justice. For others, it's a story about media excess and the destructive power of the court of public opinion. For still others, it's a warning about the dangers of children's beauty pageants and early sexualization of children. The image of JonBenét, a little girl in makeup and glittering costumes, has become iconic and disturbing. It forced America to think about how we treat children, how we represent them, what pressure we put on them. The case also exposed deep class divisions in American society. The reaction to JonBenét's murder would have been completely different if she had been a poor girl from a troubled neighborhood. This double standard, who gets media attention, which cases get resources, remains a relevant issue today. Voices that aren't heard. In the focus of media and public attention have always been the parents, police, lawyers. But there are other voices rarely heard. Family friends who were with the Ramseys that morning and saw their grief firsthand. Many of them are still convinced of the family's innocence, but are afraid to speak publicly due to possible reaction. Junior investigators who worked on the case but didn't make key decisions. Some of them, reportedly, were disappointed in the direction of the investigation but couldn't speak out against their leadership. JonBenét's classmates and teachers who remember her as a living, smiling child, not as a media image or symbol in cultural debates. Forensic experts who analyzed evidence, but whose reports may have been ignored or misinterpreted because they didn't fit the investigation's preferred theory. These voices may contain important pieces of the puzzle, but they remain in the shadows, often due to legal restrictions, fear of public opinion, or simply fatigue from media attention. Comparative perspective: child murders in America. Although the Ramsey case received unprecedented attention, it's not unique. Every year, hundreds of child murders occur in America. Most of them don't receive even a fraction of the attention JonBenét received. The statistics are grim. About 1,500 children are murdered annually in the U.S. Most killers are family members or people known to the child. Abductions and murders by strangers, though attracting the most media attention, constitute only a small percentage. The clearance rate for child murders is higher than for adult murders, but far from 100%. About 80% are eventually solved, but this means every fifth case remains unsolved. The Ramsey case stands out not only for its mystery, but for the resources invested in it. Most child murders from poor or marginalized communities don't receive the same level of police, media, or public attention. This is an injustice we must remember when discussing the Ramsey case. The case's future, realistic expectations. After almost 30 years, what are the real chances the JonBenét Ramsey case will be solved? Genetic genealogy offers the best hope. If the DNA from the crime scene truly belongs to the killer and isn't the result of accidental contamination, and if the killer has relatives who underwent genetic testing and uploaded their data to public databases, there's a chance of identification. But this requires many ifs. A new confession or testimony, always a possibility. Sometimes people on their deathbed confess to old crimes. Sometimes witnesses who were afraid to speak earlier find courage to come forward years later. But with each passing year, this probability decreases. Discovery of new evidence is unlikely after so many years, but not impossible. Sometimes evidence stored in police archives is reviewed with new perspective or new technologies, and something missed earlier is discovered. Full admission by police of their errors and transfer of the case to an independent agency could breathe new life into the investigation. Fresh eyes, free from institutional biases and politics, could see connections missed by original investigators. Realistically, chances of solving the case decrease each year. Witnesses die, memories fade, physical evidence degrades. But as long as the case remains open, hope remains. Personal tragedy behind the headlines. It's easy to forget amid all the theories, debates, and media spectacle that at the center of this case is a real child who was murdered. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey lived only 6 years, 4 months, and 26 days. From accounts of those who knew her, she was an energetic, talented child. She loved to sing and dance. She was close with her older brother. She did well in school. She had dreams and plans for the future. All this was stolen that night in December 1996. Regardless of who killed her and why, this fact remains unchanged. The family lost a daughter and sister. The world lost a child who could have grown up and contributed to society in many ways. Patsy Ramsey died of cancer in 2006, never learning the truth about her daughter's death. Before dying, she wrote a book in which she told her version of events and expressed hope the killer would be found. Her last words about the case were a plea not to stop the search. John Ramsey, now in advanced age, continues this mission. For him, this isn't a media show or an intellectual puzzle. It's a search for justice for his daughter. He wants answers not for himself. He says, but so JonBenét's memory can finally find peace. Lessons for society. What can we, as a society, learn from the JonBenét Ramsey case? First, don't judge too quickly. The Ramsey family was found guilty in the court of public opinion long before all facts were gathered. Even if they were subsequently officially cleared of suspicion, damage to their reputation proved irreversible. We must remember the presumption of innocence not only in courts, but in our public discourse. Second, media have enormous power and, therefore, enormous responsibility. The way this case was covered was often irresponsible, sensational, and harmful. Journalists must balance the public's right to know with the rights and dignity of involved people. Third, the justice system is imperfect. Even with best intentions, police make mistakes, evidence is lost, the guilty sometimes escape punishment. We must constantly work on improving the system, learning from past failures. Fourth, protecting children must be an absolute priority. Regardless of whether the killer was from the family or an outsider, the fact remains: a 6-year-old child was murdered in her own home. We must create a society where children are protected, where signs of danger are recognized early, where child protection systems work effectively. Fifth, cold cases shouldn't be forgotten. For victims' families, the absence of answers is a constant, open wound. Police departments must allocate resources to reviewing old cases, especially as new technologies emerge. Justice shouldn't have a statute of limitations. Final thoughts. We've spent almost an hour diving into the JonBenét Ramsey case, examining evidence, theories, errors, and mysteries. We explored the question, what is police hiding? The truth is probably more complex than any single conspiracy theory. Boulder police may not be hiding one dramatic secret, but rather trying to cope with consequences of a catastrophically failed investigation, conflicting evidence, political pressure, and the burden of public expectations. Perhaps the biggest mystery isn't who killed JonBenét, though that's certainly a critical question. But why our justice system so catastrophically failed in this case? Why wasn't the crime scene properly protected? Why did investigators so quickly fixate on one theory? Why wasn't there more effective coordination between agencies? Why aren't modern technologies being aggressively applied to the case? These questions matter not only for the Ramsey family, but for all of us. Every unsolved crime undermines trust in the justice system. Every error in an investigation is a lesson that must be learned to prevent repetition in the future. As we conclude our dive into this case, one undeniable fact remains. Somewhere, possibly still alive, is a person who knows what happened that night in the Ramsey house. A person who delivered the fatal blow to a 6-year-old girl. A person who has lived with this secret for almost 30 years. Will this person ever be identified? Will justice finally be restored for JonBenét? Or will this case forever remain one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American criminal history? Only time will tell. But as long as the case remains open, hope remains alive. And perhaps in an era of advanced genetics, new investigative technologies, and renewed public attention, we'll finally get the answers that have eluded us for so long. Until then, the memory of JonBenét Patricia Ramsey serves as a reminder of childhood's fragility, the importance of justice, and the price of unsolved mysteries. This was an episode of Fear Files. Thank you for being with us in this deep dive into one of history's most mysterious cases. Remember, the truth is out there somewhere. Sometimes it just takes enough time, technology, and determination to find it. Stay safe, take care of your loved ones, and never stop asking questions. Until we meet again on Fear Files.